considered a technological marvel of the aviation industry. An ambitious supersonic era. Records for speed, performance, and safety were continuously reset by it. Concorde, the most successful supersonic passenger aircraft in history. The greatest aircraft of the 20th century. People still praise it for its beauty, for its luxurious glamour. But not everyone knows how tragic its end was. Originating from a small piece of metal on the runway. Just seconds after receiving takeoff clearance, the fuel tank exploded. In a desperate attempt, the aircraft tried to lift off, but ultimately could not escape its predetermined fate. It stalled and crashed into a 5-star hotel building in the capital, Paris. Over 100 people were killed. What happened? July 25, 2000, Charles de Gaulle Airport, Paris, France. In the northern suburbs of the capital, 100 passengers were at the airport, all procedures completed, ready to board Air France Flight 4590, a scheduled flight bound for John F. Kennedy Airport, USA. The aircraft being operated was a Concorde, a type of supersonic passenger aircraft considered a technological marvel of the aviation industry. It was developed under a collaboration between the two powers, Britain and France, with the ambition to surpass existing jet aircraft. Concorde is known as the most beautiful aircraft ever built, worthy of the name Queen of the Skies. During its heyday, it was almost a symbol of luxury and class, completely different from ordinary flights. Flying the Concorde became the dream of every pilot, and flying on the Concorde was the aspiration of every passenger. Featuring a special delta wing design, Concorde was the first and only supersonic passenger aircraft equipped with 4 Rolls-Royce/Snecma Olympus 593 turbojet engines with afterburners. Thanks to this, Concorde could fly at Mach 2, equivalent to 2,170 kilometers per hour, twice the speed of sound. It could shorten transatlantic flights, which typically lasted over 6 hours, down to just under 3 hours. Furthermore, with a record altitude set at up to 60,000 feet from the windows of the Concorde, passengers could see the curvature of the Earth, an experience that even the Queen of the Skies, the Boeing 747, could never reach. Returning to the aircraft in this story, as of that day, it was 25 years old, having completed a total of 11,989 flight hours with 4,873 takeoff and landing cycles. Throughout its previous operational period, it had never encountered any serious incidents, considered one of the safest aircraft in the world at that time. The passengers, mostly wealthy business people, had spent over $10,000 for their tickets. Reportedly, one couple even used 20 years' worth of savings to realize their dream. In return, they enjoyed 5-star service, treated like royalty with fine wine and premium caviar. After the flight, passengers were even issued certificates confirming they had flown on Concorde, complete with the pilot's signature. The flight crew that day consisted of 9 members. The captain was Christian Marty, 53 years old. Captain Marty had a total of 13,477 flight hours, including 317 hours on the Concorde. He had also flown other large passenger aircraft such as the Boeing 727, 737, Airbus A300, and A320. The first officer was Jean Marcotte, who had more than 10,000 flight hours, including 2,700 hours on the Concorde. The flight engineer was Gilles Jardinot, 58 years old, a highly experienced engineer. He had a total of 12,532 flight hours, including 937 hours on the Concorde. Prior to the flight, the Concorde encountered several technical problems. The thrust reverser on engine number 2 malfunctioned, and mechanics had to repair it for about 45 minutes as no replacement part was immediately available. This Concorde itself was a substitute aircraft, used as a replacement for the originally scheduled Concorde, which also had technical issues. Additionally, it was reported that 19 pieces of luggage were loaded into the aft hold, which might have caused the aircraft's weight to exceed the maximum allowable limit by approximately 810 kilograms. After all final preparations were completed, at 1640, Flight AF 4590 received clearance for takeoff from runway 26R, the longest runway at Charles de Gaulle Airport. The weather at that time was favorable: clear skies, few clouds, and light winds. The pilots had calculated and set the critical speeds. V1 was 277 km per hour, VR was 326 km per hour, and V2 was 366 km per hour. V1 is the maximum speed at which the pilot can decide to abort the takeoff and stop the aircraft safely on the runway. VR is the rotation speed, at which the aircraft begins to lift its nose off the runway. V2 is the minimum safe speed that must be maintained after takeoff, even in the event of an engine failure. At 1642, the aircraft began its takeoff roll down the runway. The passengers were perhaps watching anxiously through the windows. The four Rolls-Royce/Snecma Olympus engines roared with their characteristic powerful sound, audible for kilometers, signaling the start of a supersonic flight. No one could have imagined that moment was actually the beginning of a disaster that would soon end the era of this magnificent supersonic passenger aircraft. The beginning of an end. Only about 5 minutes earlier, also on runway 26R, a McDonnell Douglas DC-10 had taken off. This was Flight 55 of Continental Airlines, a major U.S. airline, bound for Newark Liberty International Airport. During its takeoff roll, this wide-body aircraft had inadvertently lost a metal strip from an engine's thrust reverser cowl onto the runway. It was a piece of metal later identified as being made of titanium alloy, approximately 43.5 centimeters long and about 3.4 centimeters wide. Due to continuous flight departures, this metal strip was not detected and removed in time by airport staff. This DC-10 continued its flight and landed safely without any incident. But for the Concorde, that seemingly harmless object was the beginning of a nightmare. 23 seconds after starting the takeoff roll, the first officer announced V1. 9 seconds later, the aircraft reached a speed of 300 kilometers per hour. At 16 hours 43 minutes and 10 seconds, the Concorde ran over the metal strip on the runway. Immediately, the tire of the number 2 wheel on the left main landing gear was shredded. The Concorde had a complex design with 13 fuel tanks, mostly located in the wings and fuselage. The 4 engines were positioned under the delta wing, directly behind the main landing gear. Therefore, when the tire burst, in just an instant, a piece of rubber debris, estimated to weigh up to 4.5 kilograms, was thrown off like a projectile, severing electrical wiring, damaging the landing gear bay door, and struck the underside of the left wing at an estimated speed of 140 kilometers per hour. Some sources suggest the actual impact speed was much higher, possibly exceeding 500 kilometers per hour. The impact generated a hydrodynamic shockwave within fuel tank number 5, located in the leading edge of the wing. The resulting pressure surge caused the fuel tank to rupture, releasing tens of liters of fuel which ignited almost instantly, creating an intense fire under the left wing. The leaking fuel was most likely ignited either by electrical arcing from the severed wires in the landing gear bay or by contact with hot gases from the engines. Captain Marty had no choice but to try to lift the aircraft off the ground immediately, even though it had not reached the planned VR speed. At the same time, realizing the critical situation, flight engineer Jardinod suggested aborting the takeoff, but it was too late, and his call was drowned out by an emergency call from air traffic control. Air France 4590 trailing fire. Captain Marty began rotating, attempting to get the aircraft airborne. Their plan was to fly a circuit and return for an emergency landing at the nearby Le Bourget Airport. Before the horrified eyes of those on the ground, and possibly those on the nearby Boeing 747, the fiercely burning Concorde left the runway, striking some lights as it climbed into the air. A few people managed to capture that tragic moment on camera. The crew of AF 4590 faced another critical problem. They only had 3 engines remaining, with engine number 1 also performing erratically, likely providing insufficient thrust to lift the aircraft, which might have been overweight. The aircraft's speed at this point was only about 370 kilometers per hour, significantly below the required V2 speed needed to maintain a safe altitude. Engine number 1, which had shown signs of recovery, began losing thrust again. The aircraft's speed started to decrease. The heavy aircraft struggled to maintain altitude with only the two right engines still functioning normally. Watching the continuously fluctuating instrument readings, the alarmed First Officer Marcotte repeatedly warned about the decreasing speed. To reduce drag and try to increase speed, Captain Marty retracted the landing gear. However, due to the damaged landing gear door, the landing gear could no longer be retracted. The aircraft struggled to maintain altitude, was unstable, and never climbed above 60 meters. Due to an almost complete loss of thrust from the two left engines, the aircraft banked sharply to the left, at times reaching 100 degrees. As the Concorde flew over a cluster of buildings near the airport, debris from the aircraft fell onto the roofs below. It flew so low that the heat from the fire deformed objects below. AF-4590 then flew across the A1 motorway, then moved almost parallel to the southbound lanes. Here, someone managed to record a video showing the Concorde engulfed in flames. At 16:44, just about 1 minute and 28 seconds after takeoff, the aircraft was at too low an altitude and its speed had dropped below the minimum. Captain Marty tried to adjust the thrust of engines 3 and 4 to reduce the asymmetry and regain control, but by this time it was too late. The aircraft entered a critical stall. The Concorde's left wing dropped. The aircraft banked and nearly inverted. The first officer cried out final, desperate words. The aircraft crashed directly into the Hotelissimo Le Relais Bleu Hotel in Gonesse, a suburb of Paris, causing a massive explosion. 4 hotel employees on duty were killed instantly. Panic engulfed the other staff members and guests. They faced a horrific struggle to escape the fiercely burning building. Some were forced to risk jumping from second-floor windows to the ground to escape. Others tried to run through the emergency exits. Within moments, the hotel was almost completely consumed by fire and collapsed not long after. The remains of the Concorde and large debris pieces lay within the destroyed hotel area, with some parts scattered into a nearby field, all burned out and shrouded in black smoke. Fire and rescue services were urgently dispatched to the scene. All 100 passengers and 9 crew members on flight AF-4590 were killed. Along with 4 hotel employees, the total death toll in the disaster was 113. Additionally, 6 other people in the hotel were injured, some seriously. The Concorde accident shocked the world. Images of the burning aircraft, staggering through the air, filled the newspapers. French authorities pledged a thorough investigation. The investigation, led by the French Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety, BEA, concluded that the direct cause was a metal strip on runway 26R, which had fallen from a Continental Airlines DC-10. Continental denied the charges, arguing that the aircraft was already on fire before it ran over the metal strip and that the French court was biased. Other factors were also considered: the possibility that the Concorde was overloaded, the presence of a Boeing 747 on the taxiway, and the procedure for shutting down engine number 2 during an emergency. The AF-4590 accident, along with the events of September 11, 2001, and the development of the Internet reducing demand for supersonic travel, hastened the end of the Concorde era. In April 2003, it made its final passenger flight from New York, JFK, to London, Heathrow, before being retired from service. The retirement of the Concorde raises the question: was it a step backwards, or simply the end of an appealing but unsustainable branch of technology? After all, Concorde was not just an airplane. It was a symbol of technological achievement, engineering beauty, and the aspiration for a high-speed future.